So King Charles said he was disappointed not to go to Birmingham. Being a Brummie, I can understand that. He'd be very disappointed not to go to Birmingham. But look, there's a lot of openness here, isn't there, from Buckingham Palace? And I feel like that's part of the sort of the new royals, in a way, to be a bit more open and to tell people what they can.
Yes, look, we got this statement from Buckingham Palace last night, and as soon as you see this strictly confidential and embargoed statement coming through, given the past year, you think, goodness, what's happened now?
Yeah.
Two different headlines there. Hospital drama, minor bump in the road. Buckingham Palace very keen to stress it's more on the latter. It is a minor bump in the road. He underwent regular treatment for his cancer yesterday morning, scheduled treatment. After that, he suffered what had been described as temporary side effects, and that required a visit to hospital. He went back to the London clinic where he'd initially been treated in January of last year. He travelled by car. There wasn't any kind of emergency services involvement in it. He went on his own without Queen Camilla, and he was back at home at Clarence House yesterday evening going through his red boxes and his state papers. So Buckingham Palace keen to stress this is to be expected, given what he's going through, that it was a minor bump in a road that is heading in the right direction.
You can imagine for him, I mean, he does get frustrated when he can't work, doesn't he, when he can't carry out the duties that he wants to. But obviously he's following medical advice on this one, but he'll be keen to get back as soon as he can, won't he?
He really will, and that's right, Charlotte, because yesterday he had to cancel meetings with ambassadors. Today he had a full programme of engagements in Birmingham, due to visit the city's Royal Ballet. He was also, ironically, meant to be at a hospital in Birmingham today, and he will know just how much work goes into those engagements, and for everyone involved in Birmingham, that this is a big disappointment. They're hoping to reschedule them. As for next week, at this stage, it looks like that will carry on as planned. They've also got a royal tour of Italy coming up between the 7th and 10th of April. No change to that at this stage.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. Who wouldn't want to go to Italy?
Yes, exactly. And it's their 20th wedding anniversary to be spent in Rome.
It's a nice place to be to celebrate in that case, isn't it? But interesting, you know, people commenting Queen Camilla wasn't there. She was helping to celebrate ITV's 70th birthday, actually, yesterday at an event, wasn't she? But, I mean, if we think over the years, traditionally the sort of, you know, the royal partner wasn't necessarily there, were they? It was something, if someone was taken ill, they would just deal with it.
And Queen Camilla had pretty important engagements yesterday, didn't she?
Exactly.
She was on the set of Trigger Point. She was meeting Susanna and Lorraine at a reception for
She wouldn't
media.
have wanted to have missed that or anything.
No, absolutely not. Well, you don't miss a meeting with Susanna.
And it was a pretty brief visit to the London clinic. As anyone who's known anyone or been through cancer themselves, there are side effects with the treatment. I think for us, it's just a reminder that actually he is still going through this. Since his diagnosis early last year, the treatment continues and it does take its toll.
Suffering the effects of it, which, you know, I think about a lot of people who know others who've gone through cancer treatment, you know, our sympathies go out to him and to others in that situation. We wish him well.
And you do wonder that it's sort of what they've learnt from what happened with Kate. There was so much speculation with Kate because they didn't say very much, and that allowed people to come up with all sorts of conspiracies and all sorts of comments. I think they've probably thought, well, actually, let's not be in that situation.
I mean, they had to talk about it because they've had to cancel this day of engagements, but they have given information. They haven't talked about the specific side effects, but they have told us exactly what happened. And I think that is to avoid this vacuum of information into which conspiracy theories flourish.
OK. Sarah, thank you so much. We will be speaking to Chris Shipp, our correspondent, a bit later as well this morning, but we'll watch that space. But hopefully things feels like they're comfortable, but he's sort of doing his royal duty, isn't it, Salma, just to inform people, I think.
Well, I mean, it's very classic sort of stiff upper lip, isn't it, sort of carrying on whilst you're going through cancer treatment. And, you know, let's not forget, he's also in his 70s. So the fact that he's sort of carrying on, and you're right, he would have been very upset about not being able to make those engagements. So hopefully, the people of Birmingham won't have to wait too long to see him.
To be graced with his presence, I'm sure they won't. Right, we must move on to other matters because we've got a lot to get through today, actually, a lot to talk about, haven't we? Hangover from the spring statement is still in all the papers today. The fallout on, you know, what's going to happen as a consequence of this and what might happen next. Caroline, with seeing tax rises, and we're hearing that, you know, this is looking even more likely, even though when we spoke to the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, yesterday on the programme, she was very much not wanting to sort of say anything at this stage, but it looks like that's what people are going to have to brace themselves for.
Yeah, I think the challenge for the Chancellor is that the headroom in terms of her fiscal rules that she set herself, which is basically for day-to-day spending, only use money from tax receipts, income coming in rather than borrowing. And obviously her budget last year, some of the consequences of that were played out in the spring statement with, I think, something like £14 billion worth of cuts. So she's got a really small headroom of just, under 10 billion. And, of course, what has happened, literally sort of a day after the spring statement, is there's already a speculation about tax rises coming forward. And to be honest, I think this is probably the start. And of course, we've heard that the forecast for growth has gone down to 1%. And so she will be looking for some sort of positivity going forward. But it's a difficult time because we've got this whole tariff situation with the United States of America. The government are in negotiations with the US, but we don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. And it's going to be a difficult time for her, trying to get on with the job, trying to do the work they're doing on, getting growth, house building, getting the planning rules more open to get construction and infrastructure work underway. But undoubtedly, this historic, short balance in terms of meeting her fiscal rules is going to put pressure on.
This is a lot to do with Trump as well. I know Labour will talk about they inherited this black hole, that we're still feeling the consequences of the pandemic, etc. But, when they talk about, when she says, the world has changed, what essentially they mean is Donald Trump is back in the White House and we can't really predict what he's doing. And was it a complete coincidence that literally the day after he comes out and sort of says, right, I'm going to put 25% tariffs on cars? I mean, he's playing with world leaders a little bit here, I think, Trump.
Well, look, I think you can overstate Trump's influence. There is definitely a big shift in the world as a consequence of Trump being a very erratic US president. But in terms of UK domestic policy, there are other things that this government could do. And the thing that struck me the most is that way back in history, when you look at 2010 and the coalition government, what she's suggesting is not that different from what the coalition government did, which is essentially austerity and cutting back significantly what you've got in the state. Now, over 5 years, actually, you saw in the first 5 years, through the coalition, you saw improvements in the services, more efficiency, doing more with less. And that sort of, as a consequence of Brexit, as a consequence of the pandemic, really was damaged and challenged. So I think you've got to ask yourself, what is it that can this government do, given everything that's happening in the world? What can it actually do? Can it be more radical? Because the problem is everybody's still tinkering around the edges. There isn't a big shift. There isn't a big shift to sort of tackle Trump. There isn't a big shift to think about how we're going to fill in that trade gap now that we're not close partners with Europe. So is it actually that we're missing some radical thinking?
Yeah. I think the difference is, though, is that compared to those years where austerity, everything was cut back, infrastructure investment was cut back, everything was cut back, wages were going down, there has been efforts to improve wages for people, and that's going to be happening in the course of the next financial year. But also, they have started to deal with some of the problems like planning stopping infrastructure. They've signed off big infrastructure projects, which is good news for the medium-long term. The problem is what's happening now.
Yeah, the trouble is... Well, I was just going to say, when we look at the poverty figures, though, it's sort of... Yes, it's a difficult situation, but I think for people up and down the country, they're not only in a terrible situation at the moment, in crisis, but it is set to get worse. We've got these figures, 12 million people living in absolute poverty, with 4.5 million children in relative poverty, and these figures are all rising and then set to rise even further. So it just seems like it's the most vulnerable in our society that are having to bear the brunt of this, and that situation is only going to get worse, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is children in poverty, whether that's, from parents not in work or the cost of living or things like energy costs. I mean, they're going up as well, and that's a big issue affecting kids as well, living in cold homes. And that has to be addressed. I mean, the government has established a cross-departmental child poverty task force to address some of these issues. But again, part of that is not only just money going into those families, but also for children being able to go to school and get the best out of school. And too many of our kids are turning up school not ready for that, and particularly in our most deprived areas. But, again, there's been an announcement about more house building, and that's a social housing and affordable houses as well, because some families in poverty, particularly with young children, are living in inadequate homes and accommodation.
But the fact that their own figures, the government's own figures, suggest that more people are going into poverty as a result of this action. I mean, that just feels extraordinary. That you would allow that. Something's got to give. They go, well, I'll tell you what we'll give. We'll put more people in poverty, and we know that's going to be a consequence. They say, well, we're hoping that some of them will take jobs. There's nothing to guarantee those jobs are going to be taken up, how those jobs are going to be taken up, who's going to take those jobs up. Is this a time of reckoning for the Labour Party? There are people at home right now going, they don't recognise this Labour Party. This isn't the Labour values that they believe that Labour stood for. I mean, it's not just people at home. I mean, Colin Naismith, Debbie Abrahams, Neil Duncan-Jordan, Rachel Maskell, all MPs have talked against this policy. Colin Naismith says, I did not come into politics to inflict this on the most vulnerable people in our society, and I cannot vote for changes that will have this impact. I mean, this is what politicians have gone in for, especially Labour politicians, to help the poor. This is exactly the opposite of that.
Of course, and last year the government increased measures for the national minimum wage. They are addressing some of these issues of child poverty, and that's been going on for a while now. The trajectories have been going in the wrong direction to help these families. But again, you're right. This is a big issue for Labour. There's been lots of discussion around the cap on child benefit for families above 2, and these are the things that they're going to have to face. And come the autumn and the next budget, Labour MPs, some of those that you've mentioned today, Adil, will be looking for better answers to this question.
Selma,
and it's a real thing that affects families every day around the country.
What do you think will happen with this? Will there be enough of a rebellion from either backbench MPs or from the public saying, well, hold on a second, we can't do this because this system is not sustainable, pushing even more people into poverty?
Well, the question is, how are you going to pay for any of this? And the Chancellor won't change anything on her fiscal rules, and fiscal rules are all about how much she's going to borrow and, what the tax receipts are going to give her. She also isn't going to put up the taxation on the big 4 taxes unless she decides that she's going to change that in the autumn. But we are already a highly taxed country, so where is this money going to come from to pay for these public services? So the idea that you can just carry on tinkering around the edges as we are now, I think is for the birds.
So actually they've got to be honest and say, things are going to get worse, and this is how we're going to do it.
Or they've got to decide that they're going to be radical. Either they're going to be radical in a leftward direction, or they're going to be radical around the tax system. But what is definitely obvious is that all we're hearing is the same things that actually the coalition government did. There's nothing around planning or wage inflation or anything else that I've heard from the Chancellor that isn't different from when I was in government as policy announcements.
OK, we mentioned Trump earlier. I'm keen to sort of talk about this. I find it extraordinary. There's 2 clips this week that have come out linked to the Trump administration from representatives out there. And I just think that... And before I play this, I sort of put the context... I just think it doesn't matter what side you sit on politics, whether it's Labour or Tory, Republican or Democrat. I think what we all look for is just decency, right? Is just a little bit of respect. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene, an American far-right politician and conspiracy theorist. I mean, she's come out with some very bizarre theories in the past. A Republican representative and very loyal to Donald Trump. Here she is being asked a question by Sky News' Martha Kellner. Take a look at this.
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? From the UK.
OK, we don't give a about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
Do you care about American lives being put at risk?
Let me tell you something. Do you care about people from your country? What about all the women that are raped by migrants?
Do you care about
No, do you care? OK, you're
do you care about American lives being put at risk? About service members fighting for your country?
I don't care
and
about
your Vice President and your Defence Secretary?
Yeah, this is an American journalist. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm an American, and I'd like to hear your answer to what she's asking.
I'm not answering her question
because
I don't care about her network. If you would like to ask, I can answer.
Say, well done, both of those journalists as well. But the American journalist saying, yeah, I want you to answer her question. I mean, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it, that reaction?
But this is what we've got, though. I mean, what she said at the end, I don't care about her network, right? So it's about picking and choosing which audience you think you're talking to and not having a fair assessment or a fair communication with a whole number of people.
And there'll be a lot of people who say, and people think, oh, you're exaggerating the truth. When we talk about fascism, one of the first rules of being a fascist is to shut down questions. It's to shut down journalism. And politicians in a Western democracy should not be doing that. You should be open and transparent and answer any question.
Yeah, but we've normalised this now. So how do you challenge and you tackle that? And the only way you can do that is having other people being more open and sort of saying, actually, we prefer that way of being. But if you have politicians in the mainstream who also act as if, you know, they're sort of not giving you a straight answer, then people like her will get away with this.
Caroline, what does it do? You know, this is America, our strongest ally, and we can see how politics is playing out. We see what Trump does and how he dismisses people and all the stuff with Signalgate this week. Yet they are our strongest ally. What does it do to our moral fibre? What does it do to our character that we just support them and don't really speak out against any of this stuff?
Well, I think that this particular person has got a massive backlog of taking this sort of approach. I think there's a sort of coarseness that has come into politics, and this is probably an extreme element about it, but I think we've seen that here as well, to be honest. I think we've seen that more generally in politics. Social media has added to that, the personal attacks by politicians on each other and so forth. But what we're seeing in America is, as you said, Salma, they're not interested in Sky. They're not interested in their own sort of mainstream networks. They've got their audience, and that's who they're talking to. And whilst this has gone viral, and we're saying this is not what we need from public representatives, and she represents Georgia, for them, it's probably a win amongst their supporters. But I think also what it tells us, they're just not playing by the rules. Every engagement with anyone who challenges, it's a dogfight. And particularly, you know, people like her and others just see everything as a war.
Well, talking of going viral, here's another one, and I can't believe I'm saying this. This is from the head of US Homeland Security. I mean, you couldn't get more senior than that in security in the US. Kristi Noem. And this is all... The backdrop of this, of course, is Donald Trump announcing he's going hard on migrants, undocumented migrants, putting them into prisons. They've put hundreds of Venezuelan migrants into a prison in El Salvador. He claims they've all been vetted. Venezuela's saying, you've got some innocent people in there. This is completely against all human rights. Anyway, Kristi Noem visits this prison, and this is the video she decided to post on social media.
If you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face. First of all, do not come to our country illegally. You will be removed and you will be prosecuted. But know that this facility is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use.
Bare-chested men stood behind... I mean, this looks like something from, you know, from decades ago, hundreds of years ago, in concentration camps. That's what it looks like. It's a terrible image. I mean, it was so bad that one of our team sort of thought, hang on, is this green screen? Did this really happen? And we had to double-check, and it actually happened. I mean, what is going on? This is America.
I mean, it is just degrading. It is humane to use people in that way, whatever the situation you're dealing with. And obviously, illegal immigration is something lots of countries are dealing with. I think to pose like that in front of a group of men, as you say, bare-chested behind bars, we know who they're speaking to. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, this is flag waving to their supporters, but it is absolutely degrading.
Can I just say, though, there are a lot of people who would have really supported that content, and I think we can all sit here saying that it's appalling, and it is appalling, and we should not normalise it. But you've got to ask yourself the question, why did she feel that she had the confidence
because
to
she thinks there'll be people that will be cheering her.
Because there will be.
But there are a lot more people, I think, than we would like to believe are cheering that kind of really disgusting sentiment.
Okay. Absolutely, but it is a duty of leaders to sort of have a bit of moral fibre as well, though,
so it goes back to your point. Where are our politicians, where are European politicians decrying some of this sort of behaviour? It doesn't really happen because all of us are just sat here really defensively and we don't want to say anything.
Talking of UK politicians...
Talking about our politicians, we were touching on what Nigel Farage said earlier, and, you know, some of the quotes, I'm very pro-women, I've had the odd success here and there. Men are prepared to sacrifice their family lives in order to pursue a career and be successful in the way that fewer women are, and I was commenting on those comments earlier on. But, when we were discussing it, and you know, it is important to see it in the context of the event where this was being discussed.
Yes, so there is a lobby lunch that takes place in Westminster, and it's a little bit like the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where a politician's invited and they set themselves up, basically, and they're supposed to be very self-deprecating, and they basically make jokes at their own expense. So some of what Nigel Farage may have said was in that context and trying to get a laugh out of people.
I'm not laughing.
But
I was going to say,
you would. But then the question
is, grain of truth there in the things that are being said, even in jest.
Is that funny? Is it funny to sort of talk about the fact that men don't make sacrifice? I mean, to me, that sounds very sad. And to me, it's also like women make a lot of sacrifices. You know, if you want to have this society where men are going out there beating their chests and sort of making the money, then don't ask me to pay half, you know, as far as the mortgage or any of the other bills are concerned. I'll sit at home and take care of the kids all day, Nigel Farage, as long as you pay for it and keep me my diamonds and jewels.
Are you proposing to Nigel Farage?
Nigel,
that's a new one.
That is not
wow.
Things have taken an unusual turn.
Wow.
Good morning, Britain.
You're willing to pay for my lifestyle.
Blimey.
Caroline.
I think he might give you a call.
I mean, you know, I'd have loved to be actually in the room when this was all happening and watching the faces, particularly of the women from the lobby there. I mean, I just think again, you know, he'll probably come out and say, I was just having a joke, I was just making... I love it when, you know, people like Nigel Farage start saying, I love women or I like women, but, you know... I mean, there's plenty, I think, of women who are top of their professions, yourself, Charlotte, being one of them, in all sorts of walks of life, who actually are parents as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's a sad thing to suggest that somehow raising our kids is only for women. I think dads have such an important role to play in their children's lives and have a real impact about being part of that. So I think it's actually, you know, we can take it as an anti-women thing. I think it's an anti-dad thing, actually, and isn't helpful.
It's so dangerous. I think, like I said earlier, I think there's been lots of women this morning getting their kids ready for school, getting them fed and going to work. They've got double responsibility. They do it so much better, whereas us men don't have to worry about that most of the time. And I just think it's just incredible that you can't see that. But, hey, a lot of people will still think he's a man of the people, like you were saying. He will appeal to a lot of people.
It's Mother's Day this weekend, isn't it? So we'll wait and see what he's doing with his mother at the weekend, won't we? But we should say as well that, you know, we were doing an investigation into the Postal Service. We will talk about that in the next hour, but if you haven't sent your Mother's Day card now...
Oh, it might not get there.
We might have to hand-deliver it, because a lot of the first-class space isn't arriving the next day, so, you know, this could be an issue, couldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You have...
I mean, I just find it incredible. I just thought if you send us something by first class, it gets there the next day, but clearly not.
No, it doesn't, and I found this out over Christmas when I, still, like a dinosaur, sent my Christmas cards by post, and there were some that were still getting there at January the 6th.
Yeah. Right.
And we should give a mention to Eid as well.
It is. Eid this weekend. Salma, you celebrating Eid?
I am. I'm doing it the same day as Mother's Day, so we're getting
Sunday.
my Mother's Day breakfast.
A double whammy.
Yeah, because some people will be doing it Sunday, Monday. It sort of all depends on sort of communities, etc. But generally lasts about 2-3 days anyway, doesn't it, really? So, yeah, lots of food.
I'll look forward to my present from you.
Oh, OK, yeah, moving on. Now, the King has cancelled his public engagements in Birmingham today on medical advice after experiencing temporary side effects during his ongoing treatment for cancer.
The 76-year-old monarch spent a brief time under observation in hospital yesterday before returning to Clarence House, where he's said to have continued working.
ITV News Royal Editor Chris Shipp joins us now.
Good morning.
Morning, team. How are you?
Very well. Now, you were at an event last night where the Queen was in attendance. Was there any word or thought at that point what was about to come out of Buckingham Palace?
This was an event earlier in the day. In fact, your colleague Susanna was there, Dr Hilary was there, and that was...
We're slightly wondering where our invites are, but we'll deal with that in a bit, Chris.
Yep, sure, I'll ask for you. Queen Camilla was there, marking ITV's 70th anniversary. Now, I thought that last night, when we got the news about the King, did she sort of not know at the time, or did she, as royals are very good at keeping the show on the road and not telling us? So my understanding is she didn't know, and that was kind of late morning yesterday. Look, the King goes to hospital fairly regularly. That's part of his cancer treatment. I think what was unusual was this was an unplanned visit to hospital, and had they not had to cancel all these engagements in Birmingham today, they might not have told us. But because, obviously, there's lots of people expecting to see him today, that's why the news came out last night.
There is sort of a new era of transparency and openness, though, isn't there? Although we don't know exactly what the King is suffering from and exactly what treatment he's having, they are keeping us a bit more up to date with the progress of it, aren't they, than we've perhaps seen in previous generations.
You're right. We don't know the kind of treatment he's having. We don't know what his cancer is, but we do know a lot more. And I think, you know, it all began when they said, in January of last year, that he was having that prostate operation, a very different approach to how maybe Queen Elizabeth or Prince Philip would have treated health issues. So, yes, different in that sense. They're trying to be open, but, you know, there is a limit to how much medical information that they want out there. But my understanding is he had dinner last night. He was back at Clarence House, typically of the King. He went and did some state paperwork, of course, and there's a possibility that he may move from Clarence House to, you know, he sometimes spends the weekends at Highgrove or Sandringham. I think probably if he can do that today, then he will.
Yeah, so they're describing it as a bump in the road. They obviously want to get things back on track with his engagements. Italy, for example, still continues.
Yeah, and Italy's already been affected by the Pope's illness and they've had to cancel the visit to the Vatican, but that's in, 10 days' time. So they're meant to be in Italy on Monday week. And now I think that's all down to the doctors and whether they can adjust his schedule next week, make things a little bit lighter so that, if anything, they can still make Italy. If they have to cancel Italy, then that obviously will be, you know, quite a big step.
Yeah. Will you make sure that he does go back to Birmingham, though, because my people in Birmingham will be very upset?
I'm told it's not been cancelled, it's been rearranged.
So
there you go. Birmingham is still on the list.
You've got the power, Chris.
Yeah.
It's very good.
Breaking Birmingham news. There you go. Chris, thank you so much for all of that. Good to see you.
And we wish the King a speedy recovery. Jack Fincham, you remember him? Shot to fame back in 2018 when he was crowned the winner of Love Island after he coupled up with Danny Dyer.
But he believes that finding fame came at a price and accelerated his lifelong problems with addiction. Only a few days ago, he narrowly avoided jail after appealing against his conviction for being in charge of a dangerously out-of-control dog.
Jack joins us now. Hi, Jack. How are you?
How are you?
Yeah, you're looking well.
Thank you very much.
You've had a rough time of it, though, since 2018.
I have. It's been a roller coaster. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's been some amazing times. I've done some amazing things. Travelled the world, filmed different TV shows. Done like sort of 30 TV shows. So, you know, I've loved it. But at the same time, I think I never addressed some of the issues that I had and thought that I'd just be OK and it'd be all right. But unfortunately, you know, that time round, you know, going out and drinking and taking drugs and letting people down doesn't go unnoticed. You know, it was, you know, for TV shows and stuff like that. But I'm just glad that, I mean, it might be 7 years too late, but I'm just glad that I've got hold of it now. I understand the triggers, I understand the issues, and I don't want to go through that again. I just want to move forward and be positive and do all the things that I've said I'm going to do, because I know that I can, I've got the potential to do it all.
So when did you realise that you had an addiction to, you were saying drugs and alcohol both got to you?
They all sort of went hand in hand, really. It was like, if you know, you're drinking, then you do other stuff, and then I mentioned this before, and then unfortunately then you want to go to sleep, and then you're taking something else. It just become a cycle, you know, and... but I didn't realise it was a problem until, as I said, it was kind of sort of brought to the public and more people can see it. So more people are telling me, Jack, what are you doing?
But we've been saying you blew £1 million. Is that right? Did you blow that kind of money? Not on drugs and...
I'll be honest, as a ballpark figure, it's actually painful to say it. Like, it's painful to say it, but as a ballpark figure, yeah, it's got to be around that mark. But that's on everything.
On drugs and alcohol.
No, but it's the kind of the you know, the night out. You know, if you want to, you know, when I was living at home, it was like, OK, I don't want to go back home because I you know, look awful, whatever. So I'll stay in a hotel. So as a whole, definitely would have been that sort of figure. But I'm just glad that is just a thing of the past. That, you know, and I'm not saying that, you know, I won't always have these issues and stuff, but I've addressed them now, I've said it, and now all I can do is just keep taking it day by day.
Because there were consequences, weren't there? I mean, you know, back in January 2021, you were stopped by police, weren't you, near your home in Kent. You were charged with drug driving, a number of driving offences as a consequence of that. I mean, do you kind of look back at that time now? Was that a bit of a turning point for you? Did you sort of realise the seriousness of that and what could have happened?
I look back at it and just think sometimes, what an idiot. Just what an idiot. Like, you know, you can't... And with the driving offences, I'll be honest, yeah, you're right. I mean, you're putting other people in danger as well. And it's like... the main point I always kind of make when people will ask me about that is, like, I just think I didn't really care about myself. I didn't really care... I was just sad. I was just sad. I didn't care if anything happened to me. I didn't care. All I cared about was obviously, you know, drinking and taking drugs and stuff like that. But, you know... unfortunately, it does sometimes take something sort of big to happen for you to realise I can't live like this anymore. And it wasn't that. I just couldn't live like it anymore. And yeah, it was just hurtful.
These incidents with your dog Elvis, you know, and I'm sure, you know, of course, you love Elvis. Why wouldn't you? We love dogs. But these were pretty scary incidents for two, you know, innocent bystanders.
100%.
Where a runner outside your house and a runner, he bit into the runner's leg. And the second one, not quite a bite, but sort of grabbed the leg. How did that happen? Were you on drugs and drinking at that time?
No, not at all.
So how does that happen?
Not even in the slightest. And I hold my hands up, you know. But, by the way, Elvis is the most beautiful dog. I love him. I've never seen him show any signs of aggression.
But he did attack two people, though.
So they're a very protective breed of dog. They're a protective breed of dog. And as I said, I completely hold my hands up. I should have just made sure the door was closed behind me. So obviously I've walked out, I think the first instance to get something out of my mum's car, I think. And the second instance, it was getting something out the boot of the car again. And he just sort of slipped out behind me. So
you've left the front door.
Yeah, but he's got great recall, and even they read this in the court as well. Both times I called him back, and he came straight back. And as I said, they're a protective breed. So in both instances, it's my mistake. I should have kept the door closed. It's not fair on them, you know. And I can only apologise.
So, look, you would also, you know, you've got the charges connected to owning a dog dangerously out of control that then attacked somebody. So you have conditions now. Elvis has been reunited with you, but you've got conditions that you need to keep him with. Could this happen again? You know, because his life essentially is in your hands now, isn't it? Because if anything else happens, he will be destroyed. Is that what they've said to you?
Yeah, and as I was saying, so. He thought he was protecting myself and the driveway on both occasions. I would never walk around with a dog of that size off the lead, and you know but that's my mistake, and I'm paying for it, and so is Elvis, unfortunately. But you know, Elvis, I'm responsible for Elvis. That's the sad thing. I love that dog more than anything in the world. We stay in hotels together. We've stayed around the country together. I love him so much, and I just feel like I'd let him down, you know. And
we're running out of time. The other thing I need to clarify, because I know a lot of people, and you've had a lot of people, I think, online talking about this. That Elvis has cropped ears.
Yes.
Now that's illegal. It's seen as really cruel to dogs. And but you're saying that you weren't responsible for that.
No, I completely agree. So Elvis come from Russia. He come from Russia. Someone, a company trained protection dogs. I was speaking to the guy, and he said, "Oh, look, someone's ordered this dog, doesn't want him. Would you have him?" And I was like, "Oh, I would love a dog like that." So I took Elvis on, essentially. But yeah, for doing cropped ears and towels for aesthetics, do not agree with it. Why? What are you doing? No need for it. But his ears had already been done in Russia. I think it must be legal there, I'm guessing. And he come to me like that at 6 months old. I couldn't turn around and say, "I don't want you because of your ears," but I don't agree with it at all.
I know you've kind of, you know, you said you're in a different place now, which is obviously great. You know, we're really pleased for you. So how do you sort of see the future now? You're looking at things more positively. You feel like that's a chapter that's behind you now?
Yeah, I just want to move forward. I mean, I am completely, I'm apologetic to the two runners and all the things that I've done. You know, I'm holding my hands up. I'm not trying to say that it's right, because it wasn't. It's wrong, but I've got a lot of potential. You know, I'm back boxing. I boxed in March, and that was a thing I never thought I'd do again. You know, I boxed in March.
Is that where you're sort of focusing now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm back selling office supplies and stationery. I want to be the guy that everyone loved on Love Island, you know. So, you know, I'm selling pens again and back boxing, and obviously no drugs and alcohol.
How long have you been sober, mate?
It's Christmas Day.
Right.
Christmas Day, yeah. So,
well, look,
it's going the right way.
Listen, Jack, you know, the fact that you come on television and talk about it...
Being open and honest about it.
Be honest, you know, you deserve a second chance, and good luck to you, man.
Thank you very much.
It's been quite a week for our Labour government after a spring statement that will push 250,000 people into poverty. Yeah, 250,000. The Chancellor is now likely to increase taxes in the autumn, apparently.
Yes, the IFS think tank says a worsened economic forecast could force Rachel Reeves to demand more money from the British public. We have Treasury Minister James Murray joining us now to talk about that. Good morning to you.
Hi, good morning.
I know you're keen to talk about extra money for transport in the north, and we will come to that, but obviously a lot of people concerned about this talk of further tax rises to come in the autumn budget, and it feels like that's inevitable now, is it?
Well, look, I'm not going to write future budgets here live on air, but we know that tax and spending changes are not the only way to strengthen the public finances. What's crucial for us is to focus on economic growth. We know that is the way to strengthen the public finances. And if you see what the OBR said alongside the spring statement earlier this week, they were clear that the planning reforms, the planning changes that we've been putting in place since we got into office are the real deal. They said, look, these planning changes will increase the number of houses being built, they will increase the size of the economy, they will put more money into the public finances, and that's how we can get our public finances to be in a stronger position. And it's why it's such a crucial part of our plan for change, to focus on that economic growth.
You're pinning everything on growth, but the growth forecast has been cut, hasn't it?
Well, we know that the growth forecast this year, 2025, as a result of global uncertainty, putting pressure on borrowing costs and so on, we know that that has been reduced. But if you look at 2026 and every subsequent year of this Parliament, the growth forecast has been increased. And as I said, the reason why the OBR have increased the growth forecast in every subsequent year is because of the changes that we've made to the planning system. And what that means in real terms is that the average person will be £500 better off by the end of this Parliament than they would have been under the Conservative plans that we inherited. So it makes a real difference to people's lives.
Although if we're talking about figures, though, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation have looked at figures and they say that living standards are set to fall across the rest of the decade. The average family will be £750 worse off in real terms by April 2029. And, you know, we thought that Labour came in on a pledge to keep more money in people's pockets. That doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, look at what the OBR said. So the OBR is the independent forecaster who looks at what the Treasury sets out and says what the impact is going to be. And they were very clear that they are forecasting greater economic growth from 2026 onwards. And as a result of that greater growth, which comes from the policy changes that we've made as a government since we were elected, there'll be £500 more in people's pockets. And,
OK, so just to say, sorry, growth from 2026 onwards, but if we're looking at the picture, say, come autumn, when the budget's being done, that means that you won't have the growth then. With the economic picture at the moment, Rachel Reeves is not going to have the headroom, is she? So isn't it time to be honest with people and say, yeah, OK, we're going to have to put taxes up, we've got to find this money from somewhere?
Well, as I said, I'm not going to write budgets here live on air. You know, we are focused on getting the economy growing because we know that is the way to sustainably support public finances, to put more money in people's pockets. And what the OBR set out this week show that our plan for change is working. It is increasing economic growth. It is putting more money in people's pockets, putting the public finances in a stronger position. And that's why it's such an important part of what we're doing. You know, it's not tax and spend changes are not the only way to make the public finances stronger. Growth is central to our mission.
James Murray, can I ask you, when you were, a younger man and you wanted to get into politics, and here you are now, a very senior position, what did you go into politics for? What was your real sort of motivation that you wanted to try and make a difference?
I wanted to make sure that people, whatever their background, had a decent life and every opportunity. And I want to make sure that that opportunity is available to all.
But how does it make you feel, then, that the government that you are part of, and you play a very senior role in this government, has just made plans that are going to put 250,000 people, including 50,000 children, into poverty? And those aren't figures that we're making up. These aren't figures even from an independent body. These are figures from the Department for Work and Pensions, the government's own figures. So it's not what you went into government for, then, is it? You're not giving people an opportunity. In fact, you're giving people less of an opportunity. You're putting more people into poverty.
Well, let me be really clear about those numbers. So those numbers are one half of the story. What those numbers don't take into consideration is the impact that our welfare reforms will have in terms of getting people into work and the additional premium that we're...
You can't tell us that, can you? You can't tell us how many of those people are actually going to get jobs. Nobody knows that. There's no research to tell us how many of those people are going to fill some of the jobs that are out there. We don't know that. It's pure speculation.
Let me tell you how that works, because the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, who had their report on Wednesday alongside the spring statement, they will set out what the impacts will be in terms of getting people into work. And they'll said they'll do that later in the year for the autumn budget and so on. But the driving principle behind the welfare reforms that we're making is to help get people into work, because we know that getting people into work is the best route out of poverty. So we want to give people the support they need to make sure that they can work, they can get a job and keep a job because it's absolutely crucial to making sure those people have the dignity of work. It's crucial to making sure that the system is fiscally sustainable, and it's crucial to making sure that the support is there for those in greatest need.
Can we ask you, a lot of analysts are saying that a lot of this is to do with Donald Trump. You know, we've heard the Chancellor and various other people say that the world has changed. I think what people are interpreting that as Donald Trump is back in the White House and he's imposing these tariffs. He's now said that the car industry will face 25% tariffs. That could affect some really important car companies, Jaguar, Bentley, Rolls-Royce here in the UK. This is Donald Trump, who's rolling out tariffs. Every week it sort of seems to be different tariffs and we can't really predict what he's doing. Are we still going to roll out the red carpet to him? Does that sound like somebody who deserves a state reception and the red carpet?
Well, we're working intensively with the US to secure an economic deal, and those discussions about an economic deal are happening because the Prime Minister went to meet President Trump in Washington, and they agreed to work together on this agreement. And if we can get that agreement in place, that is absolutely the best way forward for British businesses and the British public.
But if there isn't an agreement and these tariffs are in place, would you agree that he probably doesn't deserve the red carpet rollout?
Well, look, we need to get that deal in place, and I'm not going to give a running commentary on what the negotiations are coming up with. We need to get that deal in place because that is the best thing for British businesses. You know, British businesses don't want a trade war. They don't want an escalation in terms of tariffs and so on. We reserve our right to reciprocate. We reserve our right to use tariffs. We reserve our right to make sure that we are acting in the national interest, and we won't hesitate to do so. But at the moment, the best option, the best way forward for British businesses and the British public is to secure that deal, and we are working intensively to land it.
Okay. We've got to talk to you then about the boost, the extra money that's going for transport in the north, which is obviously a good thing. It's very much needed. There are criticisms, though, that it's just not going to be enough. We know that London received 2.5 times the investment than the north. If the north was a country, it would have been second only to Greece for the lowest level of investment in the OECD. It seems people in the north have been shortchanged, haven't they, when it comes to money coming in? This won't be enough to redress that balance.
Well, I think you're right that in the past, people in the north have been left with a Victorian-era transport system, and it's not what they need, it's not what businesses across the north need. What we're doing is rebalancing the way that investment works in terms of transport infrastructure. It's part of our plan for change to make sure that infrastructure is there. So we are shifting investment to make sure there is more investment in things like the Transpennine upgrade. So let me give you that example. Transpennine upgrade is something which people, you know, using that service, Manchester, Huddersfield, Leeds, York, that improvement to that service is really crucial to people being able to get around, get to work, get to doctor's appointments. It's also really crucial to businesses to have the confidence to invest and help to grow the economy. Now, we know that the full benefits of the upgrade will deliver in the early 2030s, but we want to get on with it now. So we are announcing today, the Prime Minister is announcing an extra £415 million to accelerate those upgrades so that people will see benefits throughout every year of this Parliament. And that's part of improving lives for people right across the country and in the north through this investment. But it's also about making sure that businesses have the confidence to invest themselves, because that business investment is crucial for growth and putting more money in people's pockets.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
Very much.